Today we're going to talk about Azure. So it's going to be the Azure HotShots, stuff that you need to know that you didn't know you needed to know. So I'm going to cover a bunch of slides today. So it's like 120 something slides. So it's going to be very quick, like click, click, click. I'm going to cover a fair bit of all the bits and pieces of Azure. But if you have questions in between, I'm happy to stop and answer some of the questions. My name is Thiago Passos. I'm a solution architect at SSW. Adam Stevenson was supposed to be here with me, but I'm going to cover for him because he's got some family issues happening, so sorry for that. I'm going to try to cover his part as best as I can. I'm not as smart or as funny as he is, so I'll try my best. Okay, so for the agenda today, we're going to talk about compute. We're going to talk about web and mobile. We're going to talk about storage, databases, integration, containers, network security, development tools, and at the end, we're going to cover a bit of AI and machine learning. Cool, so why the cloud? So the cloud, the main focus of moving to the cloud would be speed, the ability to scale up and down as you want, and at the end of the day, the money, right? So it's much cheaper to move something to the cloud than putting together your whole environment to get something up and running, right? So these are the three main points of moving to the cloud. Okay, so you can scale up or out as much as you want, and you don't need to pay that whole amount for the hardware. What is Azure? So if there is an A point that I want to put for you here to go home and think about, it's gonna be that, right? So Azure is massive, but the main point of Azure is the bits and pieces that you're gonna put together. So think about a Lego box, right? So all the bits and pieces that you can put together and leverage the functionalities that Azure already provides. All right, so you don't need to build anything from scratch if there is already something there with the best practices for you to use. So think about it. If you have like a brilliant idea of building some service, have a look and see if it's already there for you to leverage some of the functionalities. So that's one of the A points. Azure is global. So right now there are 38 regions in Azure. That's twice as much as AWS. So it's huge. You can see around the globe there are plenty of regions in there. So that's a Europe Central region in Azure, and you can see by the card there the size of the first stage of this region, and that's the second step. So you can see how big it is. But then we go to the third stage of that. So an Azure region is huge. And the great thing about it, so think about containers, right? So when you think about these regions, they ship the computers in containers, like real containers. And all they have is a plug of water, network, and power, right? So they bring these massive containers with hundreds of computers inside, put in the data center, and it's ready to go. As soon as a percentage of the computers inside start dying, they just ditch the container and put another one. That's the whole container idea, right? So as soon as something starts playing out, just ditch it and bring another one back. Okay, so here's some stats for Azure. There are pretty big numbers. I think something to highlight here is that 80% of the Fortune 500 companies are using Azure. And why is that? Like 80%, that's a big number comparing to AWS and Google Cloud Services. And that's all because of Active Directory and the whole integration that Azure can give the big companies with Active Directory. And they can easily move to the cloud without making a huge change in the infrastructure. Okay, so enough of the global thing. Let's talk about compute. We've got virtual machines. So everyone knows what virtual machine is. It's pretty simple. So AWS started with that, but let's have a look at the Azure side. Okay, so who here has a very messy dev machine with Okay. Okay. So yeah, I'm a consultant. I'm a consultant, and I work for with different projects, different clients, different versions.
Sorry, I've just been asked to tell you that your live stream is not working.
Okay, so live stream is not working. Raj, is live stream working? Yeah. Okay. Should be good. Okay. Anyway, so all right. So if you get in my case, I work with different clients, different projects, like different versions of Node, .NET, and a lot of dependencies. And it's usually a mess at the end of the day. Once you work with hundreds of projects, it becomes a mess, right? If you think about a VM in the cloud, if you go to Azure right now, before I go to a dev VM in the cloud, if you go to Azure right now, you can just go there, find a template for a VM, and then kick it off, right? If you have a look at the amount of templates available in there for VMs, it's interesting to see here that almost half of them is Linux. Have you guys noticed that? So it's a pretty big point, because Azure, like 10 years ago, or even less than that, not Azure, Microsoft was very against Linux, right? And right now, like Microsoft is in love with Linux, and you have all these Linux coming into place, which is amazing. It's a big turnout. Okay, so that was something that Adam Stevenson was supposed to say, but anyway, so you come to Azure and you want to spin up a new VM, right? And the big thing about it was Adam Kogan would often, Adam Kogan is the boss of SSW, so he would often come to us and say, all right, so there's a new version of something, in this case, VS 2017, 15.3. So can you just go and update? And Adam Stevenson would say, update? Why would I do that? I can just go and ditch my VM and create another one with a new version, right? So that's what he did. So he went there, he selected the latest version. I think it's under here somewhere, and then create a new VM, okay? And then he selected the top of the line, which is pretty cheap, right? $1,200 a month. It's fairly cheap. I'm a mortal, so I can't afford that much, but Steve seems to be able to afford that, right? It's pretty cheap. But then you go there, you select a few stuff. Something to highlight here is the auto shutdown. Okay, so as soon as you create a dev environment in the cloud, just set this up. It's pretty simple, just flag, and you're not gonna be charged by the amount of hours you're sleeping, right? Shouldn't be much though, but anyway. Okay, so once you set up that, and you go to the other page, and the most interesting part of this one is this. Okay, so you're not paying for $1,200 a month. You're paying just for $1.60 an hour, right? So if you think about the amount of hours you spend developing, that's definitely worth it. And Visual Studio would be very happy with 120 gig of memory and 16 cores, right? Okay, so that's a VM running in the cloud. You can see that we've got here 112 gig of memory. I think Visual Studio is smiling from that.
Google Chrome would be
very happy. Yeah, Google Chrome would be amazingly happy.
One question. So not everyone will be able to create this VM because of the limitation on the number of cores that you can create in each subscription. For example, the Visual Studio Professional subscription, it will not be, I guess it's 8 cores or so.
That's a good point. So the question was, or the statement was, not everyone will be able to create a VM that big because of the restriction of the number of cores you can use. And that's true, actually. I think you can use 8 cores at a time, depending on the subscription. Depending on the subscription.
Logical or physical?
It's logical, it would be.
So with a Ryzen, I could quite happily go past that.
Yeah, I don't know how that would go. So the question was, it's logical or physical? It would be logical, otherwise it wouldn't be VM. But anyway, yeah, I think there is this restriction. It doesn't seem to be a problem for Steve because he's got plenty of VMs of that. Okay, so we've got app services and cloud services, right? So as I said before, AWS started with the whole IT focus, right? So you create a VM and we manage the VM for you. So you go there, create a VM, you do whatever you want in the VM. Where the Azure came from a developer's perspective, right? So you give us your code and we're gonna run for you. And we're gonna manage whatever it's underneath that. So that's how Azure started. It would have started with the top two there, and later on they kicked off the virtual machines as well, so it would line up with AWS. But anyway, some layers of abstraction here. So we have the VMs at the bottom, where you have the full control of the VM, but you have to manage the whole the OS itself. So you have to install patches, you have to updates, and do all this kind of stuff. And then we have cloud services, where you still have a bunch of control over the VM, but it will just install patches automatically, and it's gonna shut down and restart as it feels like. All right, but you still have a lot of control. You can have some start scripts and stuff like that. And then we have websites, where again it's another abstraction on top of cloud apps. And the idea is you give us a code and we're gonna run for you. We're gonna make sure it's gonna be up the whole time, but we're not gonna tell for sure which VM is gonna run on, right? So that's gonna be managed under the hood. Cool, and the good thing about it is you can start free. So you create a website in Azure and it's free, right? Zero. As soon as you start bringing more features, then it adds up, right? But right now you can start free. You're not gonna have your custom domain, and you're gonna share the infrastructure, but it's free. And then you can later on, if your site has hundreds of users, thousands of users, you can just scale up, right? And you can have your own VM, and then you can have multiple cores, multiple gigs of RAM and stuff like that. Cool. Okay, so that's a comparison between cloud services and app services. The cloud services, again, you have some control over the VM, so you can RDP to the VM. You can install some custom installation files and stuff like that, and you can define some tasks to be ran in the startup. Where app service, the deployment is nearly instant. So you can scale up to larger machines without redeploying your code, where in the cloud service you have to redeploy. And you can share content configuration, which makes the redeployment much easier.
So one question I have on the cloud service thing. So it came up when Azure was pretty new, and then what I believe is that it's not officially deprecated, but still, I mean, it might be deprecated in the near future, right? Because it's a very old model of.
Yeah, the question was cloud services, is that going away or not? Yeah, I think it's going to be there for a while still. I don't think it's going to be deprecated anytime soon. But it's not something they're going to be focusing right now. They're going to be focusing on other areas, right, instead of having focus on that.
So cloud services themselves, they are doing a lot of work. They have like you can deploy a website, you can deploy a worker role,
yeah,
a lot of things. But now they are kind of available in separate services now, which are kind of standalone but do the one thing at a time. But not like cloud services, they do a lot of things.
Yeah,
it can be used in multiple ways. So probably. Well, I believe I have read somewhere on Microsoft's side that it's getting deprecated. Yeah. But it's not yet.
But I think it's still gonna be supported still. But it's not something they're gonna push any longer.
I believe it's not recommended to start with cloud services.
Okay, so we have VM scale sets. So let's say you have a VM, right? And you want to scale out that VM. So right now, if you have one VM, the fact that you want another VM, put in that scale set and run the same thing, if you think about the logistics to put that together, it seems quite complex, right? But with VM scale sets, the whole point is for you to automate the creation of the VM. So when you create a VM, what are you going to run in that VM? What are you going to install in that VM? So you put everything in a ARM template, which is Azure Resource Manager template, and you just start that VM. And then we come to the cattle versus pets, right? So Octopus Deploy has a nice T-shirt of this idea with a cowboy hat. So basically, you have automated all your environment, and if the environment starts playing up, you just kill it. You don't try to patch it. You don't try to, because if with a pet, you just take to the vets and try to fix whatever's wrong with them. For a cattle, if the cattle starts getting sick, you just kill it and get another one. So that's the whole idea, right? So if whatever service, not only VMs, but with whatever service you have in Azure, it starts playing up, you just kill it. So you automate in a way that you can do that. And that's probably the second A point for this talk. Whatever you do in Azure, you can always go to the portal and go click on the plus button and create a new resource. But the idea is always to automate that in order to replicate. Okay, so if anything starts playing up, you just kill it. Okay, so the idea of the VM scale sets is you control like an infrastructure as a service, and you scale that as a platform as a service. So it's easy enough to scale up and down, or out and in. Okay, so that's this. And we've got functions. Functions, who is using functions? Or used functions? Cool. Okay, so function is another abstraction. So if we have a look at the continuum for the abstractions from infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, function is another layer of abstraction on top of web apps, right? So basically, function is the nano service, or what's they called nowadays. You give like a piece of code, it's a small function, you put it there and it runs for you. So what is Azure Function? So Azure Function is serverless. It doesn't mean there is no server, right? But there is a server. Anyway, it's an event-driven experience, and it also it actually extends the app servers. Okay, let me see that. So yeah, Azure Function is called nano service now. Who cares about microservices anymore, right? And the beauty of it is you pay for what you use. So if you have a function that's not being called that much, or none, you don't pay for it. And that's the beauty of it, right? So think about Azure functions as a piece of code and an event plus data, right? So it's going to respond to an event, being this event a HP trigger or something that goes into a queue or a timer, let's say. So if you want something to run every minute, every day, you can configure that with Azure Function, or a HP server, HP trigger. So you can configure like a microservice that you're gonna call using an API call. It still runs on top of Azure App Services and web jobs, so you still get all the nice things about it. And some of the features of Azure Functions, you can choose your language. So we've got, I think, 9 languages right now available: C#, F#, PHP, JavaScript, and a few other. You pay per use, so you pay for the memory used and times the milliseconds. So it's pretty cheap. You can bring your own dependencies, so either an npm package or a NuGet package or your own DLL, right? So you have integrated security. So it's by default you have, like out of the box, you have some security. So you have a token security, token authentication. You can then have that either by function or by your whole function app. So talking about language, you have, because of that, you have your flexible development. It's open source, and this is very close to the metal, so it's very quick to cache and uncache. And bot services. Okay, question.
Quick question about those functions.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't played with them, so I apologize if it comes across.
That's right.
Is this one of those things where you create a function and you have to download a whole Visual Studio solution and then you play around with it and you can modify it like some of the older app type services were?
Okay, so the question was, so he hasn't played with functions, so that's the start. So the question was, with function, if you create a function in the portal, after that you have to download a whole Visual Studio solution to make modifications and push it back to the cloud. No, it doesn't work this way. It's pretty much a single function that you push to the cloud, and it works, right? If we have time, I can do a really quick demo on how it works, but it's very simple. So it's pretty much a piece of code, a function itself. Then you configure your events, inputs and outputs in a JSON file, and that's it. You push the cloud and it works.
So this sounds very similar to, say, the actor model.
The what, sorry?
The actor model?
Actor model?
Yes.
No, I don't know.
Actor.net?
I haven't used that.
There might be something a bit later about
Okay, we can chat about it. So the question was if it's similar to aka.net. I haven't used, so I don't know. Cool. Okay, so we have bot services. So there was a statement that in 2020, 25% of all the interfaces in the internet will be via conversation as a platform or a bot, right? So that's a big number. 25%, it's huge. If you consider 10 years ago, not even that, when the iPhone came out, everything started flowing through a mobile device, right? So it changed completely how you access the internet. Instead of going to your computer, you access it from your mobile. So in 2020, that's 25% of that, which is huge. It's going to be via conversation. So let's say you go home and you say, okay, Google, put milk in my shopping list. That's already there with Google Home. It's already there, okay. But Azure provides a bunch of cognitive services that you can build a bot very simply, right? So you can put some stuff together to get the cognitive services working, and you can recognize voice, and you can recognize text and image and a bunch of stuff that I'm going to cover later today. Yeah, but bot services is built on top of Azure Functions, which is great, because once you learn a little bit of Azure Functions, you can already start playing with bot services. You can just get your service and put some endpoints to connect to Cortana, Skype, Slack, Teams, or whatever, and it's pretty simple to integrate that. We've got Azure Batch. So Azure Batch, it's pretty much a VM scale set that you run around like pretty heavy processing tasks, right? So if you have this kind of scenario, Azure Batch is the best way to do it. So you can scale out many instances and run a pretty heavy processing task, and then it all shuts down after that. So that's pretty much how it works, right? So you've got an application, and then you put it in the storage, it downloads the output, and then you have Azure Batch to get the task and run that in a pool, okay? Right, so web and mobile. Web apps, everyone knows web apps and loves it, so I'm not sure if I need to go over that. We've got API apps, which is not everyone who knows about it. It's pretty much a web app, but the focus of that is an API. Okay, and we have the API management, which is awesome, because then you can start monetizing your API calls. You can have more security on top of your API, and also you can do this kind of stuff, right? So you've got API management just before your API app, but you can traffic some of the calls to our on-premises API as well, if you want. So you can actually traffic everything to different places if you want. we've got logic apps. Logic apps is a very nice way to implement some integration or in a workflow way, right? So let's say you have a CRM instance and you want something to be triggered as soon as a new record gets into CRM. So that's how you would set up, right? So you've got a CRM integration and then you do some transforming in that XML that comes out. And then you register something after that and then you make a decision on what to do next. So that's pretty much how it works. You can build some pretty complex workflows with logic apps. You've got mobile apps, and that's not the native mobile apps that everyone thinks about, but the whole backend story of a mobile app. Okay, so who here has tried to do a sync, like a sync from your web app to the cloud? So if you're offline, you do some local storage and push into the cloud. That's a bad idea to do like on your own. It's painful. It's really, really painful. And then Azure mobile apps can do all that for you. And it's all there out of the box. It's amazing. So you can implement some security as well. So you can integrate with Twitter, Facebook, Google, whatever. And you can have push notifications as well, which is pretty nice. Windows Phone, not anymore. iPhone, Google, Android, and stuff. CDN. I reckon all of you here has used CDN in a way, right? So CDN in Azure is amazing. So you put your content, your static content, in a CDN, and it's globally deployed. So it's going to be fast no matter where you are. It's amazing. The only downside with that is it takes a fair bit of time to refresh the cache. So if you're thinking about using CDN to run some dev environment, that's not the best way, because once you deploy, you want that to be updated straight away. And CDN takes a fair bit to refresh the whole global, like 7 minutes. It's not a lot of time anyway. Yep.
Does it actually cost if you want it to be available very quickly across multiple regions? There is a parameter, right, in Azure.
Mm-hmm.
Does it lead to an added cost?
So CDN works a bit differently.
Okay. CDN in Azure.
Yeah. So the way CDN works, and I'm going to talk a bit of storage in Azure. I'll come back to that anyway. But the way it works is you can point a CDN to a blob storage in Azure, and that's pretty much all you need to do. And then everything in your blob storage is going to be available in a CDN. So it caches everything and deploys globally, so it's available everywhere as fast as possible. And one of the good things about CDN, you can actually deploy your whole Angular app to a CDN, which initially I thought, that's insane. But you can actually do it. It's pretty nice. We've got media services. So let's say you have a conference and you want to stream that video as you record stuff. So media service is a very good way to do it. Some notes here, it's not that cheap. But yeah, it's nice. Azure Search. Who here is using any sort of search? Elasticsearch, Lucene.net? No? So Azure Search runs on top of Lucene.net, the same way as Elasticsearch. And Lucene.net is amazing. So it's like a cache, but it's a supercharged cache, right? Where you can do fantastic searches, and you have scores for your search and stuff like that. So Azure Search runs on top of Lucene.net, and it's just a platform as a service. So you just go there and kick it off, and you have a search ready to go. It's pretty cool.
Does the VSTS code search use this search functionality? Because it looks like those use strings.
It's a good question. If the question was if VSTS use that to run the search in the code, I don't know. That's a good question, because it's pretty quick, actually. You should do search in code. Yeah, I don't know. I'll have a look. We've got storage. Quite boring storage. So you can put stuff there. You can put files in there. But yeah, it's actually quite important when you think about storage in Azure. And it's very, very cheap. Storage in Azure is insanely cheap. So if you're thinking about let's use that example that we have for the VM, where you have a very beefy VM, but you just run for a couple of hours, right? You pay for the processing time, but the storage itself is insanely cheap. So you can have multiple VMs with different configurations, and you just run the ones you're using, right? So you run and you turn it off, and you pay like cents for that. So it's pretty cheap. Then you have blob storage, queue storage, file storage, disk storage, a bunch of storage. One of the good things in this list is the backup. Backup's quite useful in this sense here. So let's say you have a server and you want to back up that server in Azure. So you install an agent in your server, and then you register in Azure, and then you back up, which is quite simple. So in this case, it's only one server. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But let's say you have multiple services on premises, and you want to back up the whole thing. Then you can do that. So in the same way, you install an agent in your system center, and then all of a sudden you have the backup happening for your whole infrastructure, which is pretty cool. Database.
So backup, does it back up the complete disk, or how does it work?
It depends on how you configure. You can back up the configuration itself, or you can back up the whole thing. As I said, the storage is pretty cheap, so you can basically back up.
Bandwidth might not be.
Yeah. But yeah, there are different ways that backup work. So you can back up the delta of like the
differential backups.
Yeah. We've got databases, right? Everyone knows about databases. We've got SQL, Azure SQL. We've got Cosmos DB, which is amazing. If no one uses that, have you used that? Cool. So same way as CDN, as I talked before, it's globally distributed. So it's super fast as well. And you've got the SQL data warehouse as well, and you've got a bunch of databases as a service. You've got Redis cache, Hadoop, and like MySQL, and a lot of databases that you can use. So Redis is actually not a real database, it's a cache, but it's in this list. And there is no right or wrong about SQL and NoSQL. All the database has its place. We often use, in a lot of our clients, we often use SQL as the source of truth, but then we use Redis as a cache or Elasticsearch to do some very quick searches and keep the SQL just as a source of truth. And we've got SQL Stretch. Everyone here heard about SQL Stretch? That's actually a SQL 2016 feature, which is very, very cool. So let's say you have a database on premises, and it's growing very fast. So you've got like 10 years of data there. We've got terabytes of data. But from that terabytes of data, you only use like a couple of hundred megs. On a daily basis, right? So that's called the hot data. But you still have your whole code data in there that's just taking space and taking from your speed to query the database, right? That's when the SQL Stretch comes into place, and it usually for some old systems, legacy systems, that applies very, very well. So you push your whole code data to the cloud. So all of a sudden, you don't have a problem of storage locally anymore, and the speed is going to be improved like tremendously. And you don't need to make any change at all to your application because it's going to access the same way. So you run a SQL query. If it's a code data, it's going to bring from Azure or another instance of your SQL using Stretch. Otherwise, it's going to bring, if it's a hot data, it's going to bring from that environment. Any questions so far?
Does it maintain some sort of index of the cold data on the local database so it knows
what's cold, what's hot?
Yeah.
That's a good question. That's kind of a black box for me. So the question was if it keeps an index of the code and the hot data. Yeah, I don't know. That was a feature released on the SQL Server 2016. I guess it would have an index under the hood. Yeah. But yeah, it's just a setup, and you're ready to go. Integration. That's something that Steve loves to talk about, which is Service Bus. Who here is using Service Bus? Nope? Cool. You should. All right, so...
Used it in the product, Sophie.
Okay, yeah. All right, Service Bus is amazing, right? Sorry, yeah, it's pretty cool. And if you think about microservices, the first thing that comes into place is Service Bus, right? So Service Bus is basically, so let's have a look at this top part here, where you have a basic queue in a Service Bus, right? So you have multiple people sending messages to a bus, to a queue, and you have multiple workers to process that message, right? So let's say you have a message called update customer, and on the other end, you have a worker to update your SQL instance, right? So you have multiple workers, and the first worker to be available, it's gonna go and process your message. So if you have no workers available to run to process that message, it's just gonna add up to the queue. And as soon as you have workers available, they're gonna come and pick up the message available. So that's a simple story for the Service Bus queue. But the cool thing about it, when you go to the topic, so the topic is pretty much like a bunch of queues on the same topic. So let's say we have an update topic, update customer topic, but you have different workers doing different stuff, right? So let's say you have a worker that will update the SQL, and you have a different worker that will update a Redis cache or Elasticsearch, or another worker that will do CRM, okay? So you have one topic called update customer, and you have multiple subscriptions, okay? So each subscription, if it's the SQL subscription, the CRM subscription, and Redis subscription, they will create kind of its own queue, okay? So if that worker is not available to process that message in that subscription, the message is going to keep in that subscription until it's processed, which is pretty nice. So that's a very nice way to integrate multiple microservices. So if you want, for example, in an Azure function, which the integration is already built in, you have an Azure function to process some data and push a message to queue, and you have another Azure function to get that message and do whatever you need with that message. So that's the way you would integrate multiple microservices. Okay, so that's some of the integrations I have here. Logic apps I've talked about, API management, Service Bus, and all the stuff that I have here in the list, which are pretty good to mention. Containers. Who here is using Docker or some other container service? Sort of. Okay. Container is good. I'm saying everything is amazing. All right. So container in the continuum from infrastructure as a platform to product as a platform, we've got VM scale sets. Containers is just in the middle where you still have a lot of control over it, much more than the web app, not as much as a VM scale set. Okay. So if you think about container as a service as the abstraction layer in the abstraction continuum, platform as a service is too high as an abstraction. Infrastructure as a service is too low. So like, I don't want that. So container as a service is just right. So it's just the way to go. And then we have Service Fabric.
What is the difference between the Docker and the Azure Container Services?
I'll get to that right now, just after this one. Okay, so we have Service Fabric, which is a Microsoft implementation for microservices, which is also a container orchestration. So you can still put containers in there, but you can put some stateless services and stateful services. And it's super quick. But when I compare Service Fabric to another container service, I would still go to the container service, where I have Kubernetes or Mesos or Docker Swarm. Okay, so these are some of the orchestrations available in Azure. So we've got service fabric on the left. And then we have there in the middle the container service, which we have these 3 available container orchestration tools, which is pretty cool. If you haven't played with that, it's amazing. I've got a whole talk on just on that. So you've got your container, and it's going to manage all your containers, right? So if you want to scale the number of containers running, if a container goes down, it just queues and brings another one up. It's got the load balancing all set up for you. It's just pretty cool. And in the list of the Microsoft products, container is pretty high in the list. And that's not by accident. It's because Microsoft is pushing a lot containers, right? So it's just below compute, network, storage, and web and mobile. So it's still pretty high in the list. So Microsoft is going hard on that. There are a few stuff that you can do with containers in Azure. So we've got the container service, which is the orchestration tool itself, which is not cheap. It's gonna create at least 2 VMs when you start a container service in Azure. One is gonna be the master for the orchestration tool, and one's gonna be the worker. But it's super cool. It's super cool. So we've got the container instance. If you don't need the whole orchestration, you can just get an instance, right-click, and start running. It's that easy. You've got the container registry, which is pretty much a repository for all your container images. And then I've talked about Service Fabric, App Service, and Batch. Cool. We've got network security and identity. It's probably not my cup of tea, but let's do it. So you can set up a bunch of network stuff in Azure. And I'm not an IT guy, so most of this stuff I don't even touch. But you can set up pretty complex infrastructure in Azure. So in this case here, you've got an external IP address that exposed to the cloud, to anyone who has access to that. And then you create your private virtual network. Inside of that, you have your front end with a different IP address, and you have some security to talk to your back end. So in this case, you're exposing just the front end. And then you have some disks connected to that. And then you have, so that's just a simple implementation of the network. But it starts getting a bit cooler when you bring traffic manager to it. So traffic manager is going to basically manage all the traffic that goes to your website. So let's say that you want your application, your new version of your application running in New Zealand at first. So they're going to be the first ones to choose the application. If something goes wrong, they're just going to roll back. You can do that with Traffic Manager. So in this image here, it's gonna make a bit more sense. So every traffic goes to Traffic Manager, and then you can direct to whichever way you want to go. So you've got a load balancer here on the left and right hand side, which is gonna balance the load between that VM scale set. Next. And then you have another load balancer that's going to load the balancer across all the backends. Any questions so far? No? Cool, we've got security and identity. So security is hard. It's pretty hard to implement. Who here has implemented security before, like authentication? Yeah. It's pretty hard to implement like from scratch, right? So if you have, so there are some ways that you can implement in a very easy way. So if you have less than 7,000 users, we usually go for Auth0. So has anyone used Auth0 before? So it's very simple. It's like an hour to set up. It's not an Azure product. It's a free until 7,000 users, which is pretty cool. But Azure provides something called B2C. So Azure Active Directory B2C, which is going to allow you 30,000 users for free, which is going to do the same thing, which is pretty amazing. But let's talk about security within your Azure context, right? So you've got resource groups in you've got subscription in your Azure subscription. Then you have resource groups underneath, and then you have your resource. You can actually apply security on all levels in there. So you can give someone access to your resource group or to some of the resources. These are some of the options that you have in Azure. So you have the Security Center, Azure Active Directory, which is something that I talked before about the Fortune 500 companies having 80% of the market. So they're probably using Active Directory. So we've got AD for developers. The bit you see is just the one I talked about before. You've got Key Vault that if you have some connection strings or some private configuration, that's probably the place you should start using, putting your stuff. And you have multi-factor authentication. Okay, developer tools. Who is using Visual Studio Online? VSTS. Yeah. It's funny that.
Just for a repository.
Just for a repository, yeah. Yeah, VSTS is amazing, right? So a lot of people using GitHub, and GitHub's great, but at some point you want some repositories that are not open source, right? So you want to put some code there. It's not everyone who's gonna see. So Visual Studio Online can give you like unlimited private repositories for free for up to 5 users, which is pretty cool. After that, you're gonna pay per user. But if you have multiple users that are not contributing to your code, you can just set them as stakeholders, and you're not gonna pay for that. So if you have up to 5 developers, you can have as many private repositories as you want, which is pretty cool. Okay, but let's talk about some of the ecosystem in Azure. So that's an example of a mixed ecosystem where you have GitHub, you have Codeplex, which is not there anymore, or not going to be there for soon, read only. You've got some CI tools, testing tools, Jenkins, Hudson, Gradle. You've got a deployment, which we should have Octopus deploy in there. But anyway, we have some deployment tools, and you've got some monitoring tools. So that's an example of mixed ecosystem, and you can integrate all that to Azure, and it's very simple, right? But when you talk about the Microsoft ecosystem, it's all built in, so you don't need to do much about it. So you have VSTS, and then VSTS again, and then VSTS, and then VSTS. But then you have your whole application insights and all the tooling to assist you all the way. Azure Resource Manager. Who here is using Azure Resource Manager? Okay, so who here is using Azure at all? So if you go to Azure right now, you can create a resource group, okay, in Azure, where you're gonna put all your resource in that group. So if you wanna play around with Azure, you create a resource group, put your VMs, put your stuff all in a resource group. As soon as you start playing, ditch the resource group, and then you're not gonna pay for it. But Azure Resource Manager is something completely not different, but it's gonna use the resource groups. But the beauty of it is you'll be able to automate that, the creation of the resource group, right? So there is a nice talk from Magnus Martinsen. So he did this talk in NDC Oslo last year, and it's ARM for the wing. So Azure Resource Manager for the wing. So it's a pretty nice talk, and he's showing how to create resource groups and how to use them. So that's the whole idea of automation, right? And it comes back to that A point that you should treat your VMs as cattle instead of pets, right? As soon as the VM is playing up, you just kill it and bring another one up. So if you have that as a resource group manager template, that's super simple to recreate. Okay, so let's just have a quick look. I will just have a quick demo on that. So if you go right now, if you go to this website here, Azure Quick Start Templates. So if you go to Google and Azure Quick Start Templates, it's probably going to be one of the first here. So this guy here, and you can actually come and search for any resource group, just so you can have a baseline, right? So let's say I want something with Redis. So I want to start playing with Redis. I just want a template to start with. So I've got a bunch of templates. in here. So let's say I want to use this one. I'm going to create a web app with Redis cache and SQL. So if I go to this one here, oops, 404. That one is not available anymore. Okay, let me try another one. Redis. So, all right, so let's create a Redis cache using a template. Seems there is no. Okay. Now I'm gonna go back to quick start templates, and I'm gonna go to this guy here instead. So I've got this GitHub repository, which is from Azure itself, with all these templates. So that side there seems not working right now, but it's all gonna reference this GitHub repository with a bunch of templates. So let's say I want a template with Redis, so a Redis cache here. So if I go there, all I'm going to see here is this Azure deploy.json, which is going to describe the whole template, the whole resource group. Okay, so that's just a JSON file that's going to describe the whole resource group. And if you have a look in here, you can basically just go and deploy to Azure this template, which is going to reference this Azure deploy.json. Okay, so if I go there, let's see if it's going to do anything. Okay, so here we go. So I'm using this template here, so I can select a subscription, location, and I can give a name to that. So that's the kind of stuff that you can already do. So if you want to play with a resource group, you can create your resource group manually in Azure. Just click on this plus button here, start creating your resource inside the resource group, and then you can generate a template out of that. So let's see if I have a resource group that I can use here. So I've got this Azure Superpowers resource group, and if I wanted to generate a template for that, I could just come here and go to automation script. So the automation script is actually the ARM template. So if you go there, you're gonna see the whole resource group in a JSON file, where you can just pick up and spin up another group with all that resources inside of that. Okay, so if you have a look at that, we have 41 resources inside the resource group, and you've got that bunch of templates. So that's going to be in that form that I showed you before, when you create a resource. Cool. Oops. All right, so that was the Azure resource group templates, and you can actually use Visual Studio to create it as well. So you just spin up a new resource group template in Visual Studio, and you can also use this viz.io, which is going to show you like a visual representation of your resource group, which is pretty cool. Application Insights. Who is using Application Insights?
Previously I've used.
Previous? What did you find about it?
Yeah, the best thing I find is the integration with Visual Studio. So if something happens, you get with code lens, so it shows.
Yeah, in code lens you show the number of errors and stuff like that. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty nice. So the whole idea is, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So that's the idea of Application Insights, right? So Application Insights it's gonna generate a bunch of metrics for your application. It's gonna generate logs for any errors. It's gonna show the metrics of what pages are using the most, what are being used the most, how long it took to load the pages and stuff like that. So if you think about this challenge here, so you want to be able to have a look at the application health or the outage that's gonna happen in your application and stuff like that. So you can have all that in Application Insights. So it's gonna track every time that there was a failure or an outage in your application. Or if you have an issue happening in production, how are you going to troubleshoot that? So Application Insights is going to help you with that. So when there is an issue with your application, Application Insights is going to track that error, and you can easily go there to troubleshoot any issues. And again, it's always to improve, right? So if you always have a look and see what's being used the most, you're going to be able to improve that continuously. Okay, so let's talk about AI. That's something that Steve is super excited about it, and I'm actually very excited about it. And I'm actually going to do a quick demo here. Who's using AI at the moment? Yeah? How did you find it so far?
Haven't used it in Azure.
Okay.
It's challenging.
It's challenging. All right. So Azure is going to change your mind. All right. So at SSW, we have this project called Sophie. I don't know if you guys heard about it. You don't count. Yeah. So this project called Sophie. Sophie is a persona that Adam Cohen is the boss. So he created this persona like 20 years ago. And he actually created a LinkedIn profile and all this kind of stuff. So people would join SSW and would ask, oh, where is Sophie Bell? She's pretty nice. I want to meet her. Yeah, she doesn't exist. So he created this persona so he could send emails from Sophie Bell to everyone, right? So without using a person's email, but using this persona. After we had all these cognitive services come into place, they had this great idea of putting together Sophie Bell as a digital receptionist, right? So I'm going to show you a quick video of that. It's not going to take 4 minutes. I'm going to just play like the first 40 seconds. So that's Sophie Bell, or SSW Sophie. Right, so the whole idea of SSW Sophie was to use all these cognitive services available to track who's in front of the camera, to use some of the emotion detection. So if the person is sad, it's going to tell you a joke just because JK is funny. It's gonna get your agenda, and it's gonna bring up some of your agenda and stuff like that. So you can see from there, you can see like the amount of stuff you can do for such like a little integration. Okay, so let's have a look here. Some of the demos that I have here. So for example, this one is this left-hand side here is a picture that I can put actually any picture here, and it's gonna describe the whole picture for me. All right, so it's gonna generate all these tags. And it can actually go to the face and recognize the gender, age, emotion detection. It can detect what's the percentage of anger, sadness, happiness of that person, which is pretty cool. So if you go and select another image here, ooh, 4 meg, that's pretty big, not this one. Yeah, the God demos are not working that well for me today. Okay, so that worked now. So you see that I can use any image here, and it's gonna show me some cool stuff here. So it's a train, a platform, station. So it's pretty accurate. Okay, outdoor, woman, clothing, beach. So that's one of the API endpoints, the cognitive services, which is very, very simple to implement. It can detect faces as well. So that's what we're using for Sophie Bell, isn't it? So we've got an image. The image is going to be captured by the Kinect. Right now, I don't know if they changed the camera. But it's basically going to match who is in front of the camera, right? And that's basically how it does. So in here, you can see that the level of confidence to check that this guy here is the same guy here, is 73%, so which is pretty high. So if you select another person here, if it comes up eventually, The internet's not working fine for me today. I think it's because I was logged for too long here. Maybe I have to refresh. Or just the internet's dying. Okay, so I select another image here, and you see that the level of confidence is actually 22%. So that's definitely not the same guy. Cool, but what about this speaker recognition? As I was talking before, we have Google Cloud, Google Home, right? So you get to your home and you say, "Hey Google, what do I have in my agenda today?" But what if someone else go to your home and say, "Hello Google, what do I have in my agenda today?" Is that going to show your agenda or his agenda, right? So the speaker recognition it's actually going to define who is speaking, who is actually speaking. Not only the command, but who is actually speaking. Okay. So if we have a look at some of the demos here, so I'm gonna get this. I'm gonna play an audio here.
A generation raised in the shadows of the Cold War.
So it's gonna check who is the person speaking, and it's gonna tell who the person speaking is. Okay, so if I change here, you see that the ID changes here, because these are some predefined speakers that you can actually go there and you can speak up a couple of things here just to recognize your voice and define who you are, and you can actually try again to see if it recognizes you, which is super simple to do. And there are a bunch of other services available that you can just use. So some computer vision that I showed you before, face API, but you can actually do the same with video APIs, which right now is in preview, but you have a bunch of more stuff like translator, speech. So if you speak another language, it's going to translate real time. So pretty cool stuff out there. Some text analysis. So if you can, so Louis on the left-hand side here, so you can actually define the intent of the person. So if you go and say, "Hey Cortana, can I have a pizza?" So when you say that, the intent is going to be order a pizza, or get me a pizza, buy me a pizza, get my favorite pizza. So all of that you can define as an intent within your app, right? So Louis will help you with that, and it's super simple to integrate. So it's all about using your Lego blocks again. So you have all these features, all these blocks that you can use and leverage for your application. And it's very simple to integrate with. So I've got some recommendations API, some knowledge base and stuff like that. I've got search that we talked before on the Azure search, but that's a whole other cognitive services. We've got some labs, for example, the Project Johannesburg, which is gonna, which can create routes for deliveries and stuff like that, which is quite complex to do yourself if you want to. And we've got some lab that's just there for you to just get and use it. We've got machine learning. Machine learning is quite it's a black box for me. I've heard a lot of people using it and they love it. For me, all I do is get the result out of it. Okay, it seems pretty simple. They said that everything that you need to do is just select the right algorithm, but selecting the right algorithm might be a bit challenging if you're not a data scientist. But yeah, I just use the result and it works greatly. It's pretty good. So you've got your machine learning studio where you can start for free. You can just go there and start playing with it. So you can select different algorithms, different data sets, and see the results. I'm gonna use it, but yeah, it's in my to-do list. I still haven't got there yet. So where to from? So in the other talks that I delivered for this one, is all about talking about microservices, right? So there are some books here that I would recommend you to read if you wanna get into microservices and containers. And the whole architecture evolution. As before, we had the whole spaghetti architecture, which was pretty hard to maintain, pretty hard to do anything. Then we started building all the layers and layers with the lasagna, as I think they called, with dependency injection and all that nice things. But right now we are in the ravioli age where everything is self-contained to microservices. And that's it. Thank you very much, guys. So if you have any questions, yep.
Said you were going to demo the functions.
Oh yeah, I can demo the functions. Let's do it. Let's demo a function. It's probably going to take me 2 minutes. Put in the clock. All right.
I'm starting now.
All right, I've got some functions here already. All right, so these are a set of functions that I created for the Azure Superpowers, which is a workshop that we ran here the other day. I'm going to show you some get customer. Okay. So that's a simple function. So let's create one. Let's not use anyone that's created here. So I'm just going to go to my app settings here, and I'm going to turn that into, all right, so it's read and write. Let's create a function. So I'm going to create a simple HP trigger function using C#. Okay. I'm going to give it a name, HP trigger 1. I'm going to create. So that basically uses a template to create that. That's as simple as that. Can you see the code here? All right. So that's just a function, really. And in here on the right-hand side, you're going to see in the function.json, you've got a bunch of integrations. So you've got the trigger, which is this HP trigger, and the output's going to be a HP result. Okay, so as any API endpoint, you've got an input and output. So you can see here, it's getting the request in. We've got some logs, so we can log some stuff that goes in. And then it's going to get some parameters, and it's going to result that. So you've got a function up and running and ready to go. So if I want to run that, I can either go and test, run, and I can just run, and it's going to generate the result. And here, you see that's generated a 200 OK code. And if I just not OK Google.
According to Mayo Clinic, an inflammation.
No. All right, I can actually get the endpoint here. I can copy the endpoint, and I can.
Okay.
No, not talking to you. I can paste the URL here, and it runs. So it's there and ready to go, right? As simple as that. So you can go to your commander as well, to your console application, to your command line. And do the same. So you can download the Azure Function Core Tools, which is the CLI for. Come on. All right. So let me just do test fun. All right. When you install the CLI, you have this function here, command, that's going to do pretty much the same thing that you're doing in the portal. So you can actually come here, initialize a function app, which I didn't do right now because I had the function app already. But I can just create a new one, and I can see the same templates that I had there in the browser. So I can create C#. I'm going to create a HP trigger, same way. And I'm going to say HP trigger 1. OK, so if I go to Visual Studio Code, it didn't open mine. Close that again. Oh, I created that inside. Oh no. I should have created here. Sorry. Func new. All right. right, so if I go code now. Okay, so what you're going to see here, I think it didn't create, okay. Okay, cool. All right, so you can see that it created a host file, some local settings. So if I want to add some connection strings, stuff like that, and not push to GitHub or any Git repository, I can put in my local settings. And each function is going to be a folder inside that function app, right? And all you're going to see here, so later, so the same things. You have the integrations, inputs and outputs, and you've got this run.csx. So the rest is just rubbish, just README file and sample data. But yeah, the main points here are run.csx and function.json. And you can actually run that locally. So if you do host start, you can actually run that locally, and you can actually debug if you have Visual Studio in your dev environment. So if I come and hit that, so it's going to do the same thing. Name equals Thiago. So you can run that locally, and you can just commit to a Git repository and set up continuous integration in your function app. So that's as simple as that. You don't need to have any complex stuff in your environment. So you don't have to open Visual Studio solution or anything like that.
If you want to implement some kind of security on Azure, online Azure, like for example, like I don't know, some kind of user that like authentication or something. Now you just expose it.
All right. So by default here, I think I had that open. Yeah, let me just go back there. So by default, when you create a function in your function app, it uses the function authentication. So if you go and create a function here, so you see here, it's using the authorization level here is the function. So it creates a token per function. So by default, the security is implemented. Unless you come here and you put anonymous, and then anyone can access that function, which is a crazy thing to do. But yeah, function, you have to pass a token to do it. So if we go to the function that I just created, you can do that. But yeah, you have to configure that in your function. So it's not here that you would authenticate.
But is it like all the keys of that directory and the thread context? Or
Yeah, you could do that, but in the function itself.
And then you have another function that you got the code like for the.
No, you wouldn't authenticate before even getting to the function. So when you hit that, it's gonna check if you're authenticated. Then, for example, you can use auth0 or auth to authenticate even before you get there, and then you go somewhere, authenticate, and then get back to the function.
What kind of problems should you use an Azure function? Because is it recommended to do things which are stateful? I know this debate about stateful can.
Yeah. So Azure function by definition is stateless. So it's not recommended for stateful work. But if you think about stateful as, all right, so you start from a state that's coming from a service bus. If you think that as stateful, then you can definitely use it for that. And it was actually, the whole point was using Azure function is to have these integrations. So if you have a function, for example, that's gonna bring, the example I gave before, update customer, and then you go and put in your service bus saying update this customer, and then you put an object in there, which is going to turn into a JSON file. And in the other end, you have multiple functions listening to that queue, and it's going to grab that object, and it's going to do whatever with that object. If you want to call it that state, then it's going to be a stateful work.
I'm just trying to compare it with the APIs, regular APIs, Azure functions. I mean, what is the advantage that one is good compared to the other? I mean,
Yeah. It's a very different mindset. Because the whole point of Azure Function, it's the whole model. It's not only the development, but for example, you can in your function app. So you have a lot of advantages just by using the function app. For example, you can use C# because you know about it and you know how to use it. But let's say you're on F# to do some other stuff that's it's better for some other aspects. Like it's like using the right tools for the right job, right? Then you can have F# function here created by you, for you in the same function app. So you can have multiple functions in your function app, each one with a different technology, a different language to do different stuff. So that's one of the advantages. The other one is the way it scales. So it scales based on demand, where if you have your API that deployed to a website, it's not gonna. If you don't set up scaling, it's not gonna scale. But where in Azure Functions, if you have an endpoint there and like hundreds of calls happen at the same time, it's gonna scale massively up and down as it finishes. So it's gonna handle the load like quite nicely. Where if you have a website, it's not gonna scale automatically. Yeah. Yeah. So there are a few advantages and disadvantages. So if you wanna cache some stuff in that call to be called by another function and stuff like that, so you have to work around some of these areas. So you can implement a Redis cache and the function to call the Redis cache instead of using a cache locally.
What I think about is it's more like the endpoints of a pipe, like Linux with pipes, right? You do something, the output goes to something else.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that's one way of looking at it? Like you do something in one Azure function, and the output is sent through a message bus.
Yeah.
Bus
Yeah.
To some other as
Yeah.
input.
Yeah, can definitely do that. Yeah, that's one of the examples that we have here. So update customer, it's an example that we use here. So all this does is brings a HTTP request and pushes into a topic queue, which is a service bus, right? So that's it. As soon as it sends to the service bus, it's done. It's gone. You're not being charged for that anymore. Right, and that's the whole idea. So the whole idea is you get in and out as quick as you can, because then you're not being charged for that. So if you go in and then you're expecting something to be available for you to process, you're waiting for that to happen, then you're being charged for that. Where if you put it into a service bus and process later by some worker that is available, you're not being charged for that. That make sense?
It's quite interesting.
Yeah. It's a different mindset, yeah. But it's pretty cool. Anyone else?
Is that possible to implement cores?
Cores?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Like for example,
cross origin resource sharing. Okay, yeah, it's out of the box. Yeah, you can go to platform features here, and you have cores. Yep, simple as that. Yeah.
How would you go about setting up tests, automated tests for these?
Okay, so the tests, it depends on what sort of tests you're talking about, right? So if you're talking about integration tests, then yes, definitely. If you're talking about unit tests, then if you have your business logic that you want to run some unit tests against that, I would put that in your own DLL, and then and push that DLL to Azure Function to use, because the Azure Function is going to be just an endpoint to call something else, right? So if you have all your unit tests against your own business layer, you can have that in your own DLL and then provide that to Azure Function to use.
Oh, so you can actually reference it.
Yeah, you can define your own references if you want. So I'm probably going over time, but yeah, let's have a look here. If I come here, so this I'm probably too big here. Let me just bring back down. So I've got this function called persist customer. And we're using DAPA for this example here. So we needed to bring the DAPA NuGet package into this function so we could actually use DAPA, right? So in the function itself, you see here that we're using DAPA and we're using SQL client. And also the configuration so we can get the SQL connection. So you can actually create a project.json in there, and you can define any dependency, right? And if you have your own DLL, you can just put your DLL in there, the actual file in there, and reference that.
Can you get the debug points hit on the functions running on Azure, on your local machine?
Locally, yes. Yep. Actually, there is a way to do remotely as well. I know there is. I haven't tried. But yeah, there is a way to run.
So in Azure, I believe it's not there.
Huh?
In Azure, it might not be possible.
It is possible.
In Azure?
Yeah.
In the browser?
Yeah. How am I going for time there, Raj?
Keep going.
Keep going? I'll keep going. I like play, I'll play. All right, so I'm going to create a test.js here. All right? MD test.js. All right, so I just create a folder. I'm going to initialize a function app. And I'm going to create a function. So right now I'm going to create with JavaScript, right? So just simple. And I'm going to create a trigger here. Same way. It's just simple. HP trigger. Trigger JavaScript. Okay. Okay, so I created the same function but using JavaScript, right? And I can, let's put a breakpoint here and see if it works, right? Think that's gonna work if I run it? So if I go host start, func host start, it's gonna kick off this function app. And I'll be able to call that, right? It's probably not going to hit the breakpoint. Okay. And that's the whole difference here. So I'm going to stop that. And I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do debug VS Code. Okay. And when I do that, I'm going to come back to this guy here. And I'm going to start debugging, which is just F5. If I run that again, I should hit the breakpoint in there. So I'm ready debugging. That's JavaScript. And right now, you can only debug, I think it's changed. I think you can debug C# code, but I haven't tried in Visual Studio Code. But you can do that with Visual Studio, the full Visual Studio. You can do.
What about TypeScript?
That's a good question. TypeScript is in preview, or right in Azure Functions. I'm not sure. We can try. Sorry, what's that?
You add a template for TypeScript.
Yeah, we have templates for TypeScript. So if I go func new here, we have TypeScript here. All right, let's see if that's gonna work. Yeah.
Don't you need to
No. Yeah, so TypeScript is in preview right now. So maybe it needs to compile the TypeScript before it runs locally. Thank you. Yeah, I think it needs to compile the TypeScript before it runs locally. I haven't tried that locally, so that's a good point. Okay, anything else? No? Cool, thank you very much.